Trump transition is already unlike any we have ever seen. This Week Live starts right now.
From ABC News, it's This Week Live. Here now, Jonathan Karl.
Welcome to This Week Live, our look at the week in politics here on ABC News Live. I'm Jonathan Karl. Thank you for streaming with us. It has been 10 days since the election, and President-elect Trump is carrying out his transition in his unorthodox way as he ran his campaign. The past week has been a flurry of personnel announcements from Mar-a-Lago. Some of the cabinet nominees are both unsurprising and widely respected. Marco Rubio, for example, is Trump's choice for Secretary of State. He's been in the Senate for nearly 14 years. He served on the Foreign Affairs Committee and is currently the top Republican on the Intelligence Committee. For Secretary of Interior, Trump has tapped North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. Nominees like Rubio and Burgum are both loyal Trump supporters, but also people who have experience and have earned respect across party lines. They are likely to be easily confirmed. But Trump has rocked Washington this week with his choices for some of the most important jobs and most powerful jobs in all of government. Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Health and Human Services, Director of National Intelligence, and Attorney General. The choices Trump has made for those jobs are unconventional and they are controversial. And Donald Trump is going to have to wage a serious battle to get them confirmed. We're going to check in with Mary Bruce and Catherine Falders for the latest from Mar-a-Lago in just a few minutes. But let's begin with ABC News political director and Washington bureau chief Rick Klein. Rick, first of all, we knew that Trump was going to make some outside-the-box nominations, but when you look at people like Pete Hegseth, when you look at somebody like Matt Gaetz for Attorney General, when you look at Tulsi Gabbard for the Director of National Intelligence, these are not just outside the box. They're outside of the universe.
Yeah, and they weren't on anyone's bingo card. And I think you could look at this in two ways. You could look at this as Trump putting exactly the kind of people he said he would put in and moving very quickly to do that more quickly than any nominee has or any president-elect has in history.
And a lot more quickly than he did last time. Remember,
That's right.
He didn't make his first cabinet nominee last time until December.
That's right. And you could look at these names and say, well, these are people that went to Trump rallies. These are the people that supported him and that he'd like to hang around. And they, in many cases, lobbied him very directly. You can also look at this as more of a strategic play where Donald Trump is going to be testing his real sway in Washington. Because if he's able to get these individuals confirmed, even most of them confirmed, that is a major statement in and of itself. He's talked about end arounds the Senate. That hasn't been met with serious resistance. The test is going to be in the United States Senate, where they have a brand new majority leader. Which ones of these can you actually get through?
Jonathan. Okay, all right. So let me, you're good. You're our political director. You're good at kind of interpreting what's going on and translating. So first, I want to start with a series of statements that have been made by senators over the last couple of days, at least one of which refers to Matt Gaetz, who of course was had been accused of an improper relationship with an underage girl. It was the subject of and drug use and several other things. It was subject of an ethics committee investigation. The ethics committee report has not been released. It was basically mothballed now that he has stepped out of Congress. But with that context, I want you to listen to what some of the these are all Republican senators, have had to say.
Well, we'll talk about it for certain. I know he's going to have an uphill battle.
A lot of people will spend a lot of political capital on something that even if it got done, you'd have to wonder if it was worth it.
I think there should not be any limitation on the Senate Judiciary Committee's investigation, including whatever the House Ethics Committee has generated.
So you want to see it?
Absolutely.
Okay, so first of all, let me state just a quick question, because I want to see how carefully you were listening. What's one thing you did not hear in any of those? Were all three senators, two that were making it clear that they're far from convinced that they're going to vote for Matt Gaetz, and one just saying he wants to see this report, which Matt Gaetz doesn't want anybody to see. What did you not hear them say? I
did not hear them say the president-elect gets to choose the people around him that he wants, which is kind of the stock Republican answer. Did I get that quiz right, John?
You got it wrong.
They didn't say that.
You got it wrong. I mean, it's correct. It wasn't the answer I was looking for.
Okay.
So I wouldn't say you got it wrong. What you didn't hear is you didn't hear anything to say that they are not going to vote for Matt Gaetz.
Okay, that too.
Yeah.
But look, you see them lay the groundwork for it. I look the Gaetz example is probably the cleanest test of all of them because of the timeline of the resignation, the ethics committee, the fact that you have such wide reporting, including our reporting at ABC, about some of the allegations that are likely to surface out of that, what's on the public record already, not to mention his reputation as a bomb thrower politically. I mean, that's.
Yeah. I mean, he's talked about going in and firing prosecutors and using DOJ to go after those that went after Donald Trump. I mean,
in the way that Donald Trump has operated this week, Hegseth was the big story until Gaetz was the big story, and then Bobby Kennedy Jr. became the big story. And I think overloading the system like that, it's going to mean that senators have to choose their battles because realistically, John, you've covered a lot of these. I've covered a lot of these. There's always a nominee or two who doesn't make it to the finish line. Either drop out or worst case scenario, they get defeated on the Senate floor. You can imagine one or two of these nominees not making it. It's hard to imagine 4 or 5 not making it with the 53 or so Republican majority.
Okay, we're going to go to Mary Bruce in a second, but before we do that, Mary Bruce, of course, our chief White House correspondent who is down there outside of Mar-a-Lago, is going to tell us what's really going on and what the expectation here is. But one of the things, before going into this, Donald Trump was insisting that John Thune, or anybody running to be Senate Majority Leader, but Thune won the race, agreed that if his nominees can't get through, that they would do what's called a recess appointment, or put Congress into recess so that Donald Trump could confirm them, place them into power without confirmation. So John Thune was asked about this with Bret Baier on Fox News last night. And I want you to listen again with an ear towards interpreting what he is actually saying. Take a listen.
If that is a problem and your onus for you is to try to get the president who he wants to be in the cabinet, do you then punt to a recess and try to recess the Senate for 10 days and get those appointments in?
Well, it's an option, but obviously it takes, you have to have all Republicans vote to recess as well. So the same Republicans that you mentioned that might have a problem voting for somebody under regular order probably also have a problem voting to put the Senate into recess.
Okay, so just so we're clear, because it is a little complicated here, but it's massively consequential. Donald Trump wants to be able to bypass Senate confirmation if he has to. And the way he can do that is if, under a Supreme Court ruling from 10 years ago, Congress has to be in recess for a full 10 days, and then he's allowed to do a so-called recess appointment. What did you make of what Thune said about that?
So I think for all of the appointments this week, the elevation of John Thune might actually have been the most consequential because the Republican senators and senators-elect had an opportunity to go with the MAGA choice, with the Trump choice in Senator Rick Scott. He didn't even make it past the first ballot. He didn't even split the vote sufficiently to be one of the last 2 candidates standing. The second candidate was John Cornyn, who we saw a moment ago expressing some skepticism about Gaetz, wants to see that ethics report. John Thune is the closest thing to an establishment figure who was left standing. Not to say
he's a Mitch McConnell protege.
That's right. Not to say he's not very much a believer of the Trump agenda, but he's not the same kind of card-carrying Trump supporter. MAGA would not be a label that he uses for himself at this point. And I think he's already staking out the ground by which Republicans and Democrats will debate in committee and then on the Senate floor whether these individuals belong in the cabinet. They will make a judgment. The consent part of advice and consent is still real in John Thune's mind. We'll see whether that stands and whether that holds. But I think that's a really interesting and nuanced answer.
Yeah, and I think that the other thing that's key in what he said there. So John Thune had said that he was open to this idea of recess appointments. Donald Trump insisted that all the candidates say they were open to this idea. But he pointed out something very important, which is to go into recess, the Senate has to vote to go into recess, has to vote to adjourn. And that vote requires a majority. It requires 50 votes. So what senator is going to be voting against the nominee and then be willing to vote to go into recess? So this is a very interesting thing to follow, and we'll see. And I want to go. I think we have. Do we have Mary Bruce there in Palm Beach? Excellent, Mary. It's the weather looks good. It's good to see you. What is your sense down there? You've been down there for a little bit. Does Donald Trump expect that he is going to get these most controversial nominees, beginning with Matt Gaetz, confirmed the old-fashioned way?
Yeah, I think he intends to get them confirmed one way or another. Look, he wouldn't have named them if that wasn't his intention. And, yes, he knew that they were going to get this pushback. He knew there was going to be this level of criticism. While so many in Washington, as you've been discussing, are maybe shocked, certainly these picks, were not surprising given their loyalty to Trump and given, the promises that were made on the campaign trail. But, yeah, Donald Trump and his team do think they're going to be able to get them through. The question is, how much political capital does Donald Trump want to spend on these fights? And who does he want to spend the most political capital on? As you noted, a lot can change. Certainly, new information can come out. It is not unusual to have some picks, be put out there and then have the nominees themselves withdraw their names. But a lot of this, as you were also discussing, is really just a test for Republicans. How loyal is the Republican Senate going to be to Donald Trump? How much is he going to get them to be able to fall in line behind him? And based on what you heard from John Thune there, he is not ruling out recess appointments. In fact, that's exactly how he described it when he was pressed by our Rachel Scott, saying he's not ruling anything out. And as for, whether, what Republican might be willing to vote against someone in the confirmation process, but then be willing to vote to go into recess, well, there is a fine line here. And we know that Washington likes to walk fine lines. And it certainly would give a Republican senator, a bit of a backdoor, a bit of an out to say, well, look, I didn't go on the record. I didn't support this controversial pick, but, voting to go on recess, maybe that's another thing.
This is why it's good to have a chief White House correspondent that also spent years as the chief congressional correspondent. You know how this works. Let me get your sense, though, from talking to the transition team, those around Trump, is he surprised by the ferocity of the blowback to these picks? Are they surprised?
Yes and no. No, I don't think so. I think they knew. He knows what he's doing. You know that well, John. He knows that when he picked someone like Matt Gaetz and did it, really in a way that I think shocked many, even within Trump's inner circle. Even some on his own team didn't necessarily see this coming. He knows that this is going to make a lot of waves, and he knows the kind of criticism it's going to get. So I don't think they are surprised by how many Republicans are coming out and questioning this. I think they certainly don't want that ethics committee report to be made public. We'll see what ends up happening there. But no, I don't think they are. I think he knows well what he's doing by putting out these names, by announcing these cabinet picks, many of whom are controversial. This is a fight that I think Donald Trump welcomes and in some ways relishes.
And the recess appointment talk, do they expect they're going to have to go there? And is Trump? I know it's the option they have. It's the nuclear option. Do they think they're going to have to pull that trigger?
They're willing to go there. I think, do they have to? It remains to be seen. But I think that it is a card they are willing to play if they have to. But again, so much comes down to John Thune, who certainly didn't get much of a honeymoon in this new leadership role at all. And what Republicans, who are they willing to get on their side? There are some who they know they simply will never be able to get on board. But is there some wiggle room, with some of the others? We'll have to wait and see. And I think that is part of this that is really a test for the Republican Party and a test that the Trump team and Donald Trump himself is happy to put Republicans through. They want this.
He likes to make fellow Republicans feel uncomfortable. Hey, before you go, when do you expect we'll see more cabinet picks? We're still waiting on Treasury and some other big ones.
Yeah, well, at the pace that they've been coming and given the hour, John, I wouldn't be surprised if I picked up my phone here and saw some more, because this is sort of the witching hour that we've seen over the last several days. They are moving at this breakneck pace. They're really on track, actually, to get most of the cabinet named before Thanksgiving if they keep this rate up. There are still several big names left out there. Of course, Doug Burgum was announced today for Interior Secretary, though Trump got ahead of himself by announcing that last night. But he officially put out the announcement just a little while ago. I think you're going to continue to see them keep up this pace, John.
All right, Mary, we're going to be on the air for another 46, 47 minutes. If you hear more, will you please yell out a scream? We'll bring you right back on. We will bring you right back on. All right, we're going to get to Catherine Falders in a second. But first, Rick, I thought Mary made a very interesting point, which is, first of all, members of Congress like to find ways to avoid difficult votes. So maybe the vote to go into adjourn is not as difficult as the vote to confirm a Matt Gaetz or a Bobby Kennedy?
That's possible. There's also possible, and John, I know you know your Constitution on this.
Yes,
there is a clause in the Constitution that gives the president the opportunity
Article 2?
Article 2.
Okay.
section.
Go ahead. Right.
That says that the president, if there's a disagreement between the branches of Congress, between the House and the Senate, can deem the Congress to be in recess. And this doesn't have a lot of precedent, but you can imagine a scenario, if you want to play this out, where maybe the Senate doesn't agree to do it, but the House does it. And the House is much more likely to go along with Trump on this, and the president can make that declaration. By the time it would even get to the courts, you can imagine
his people are in place.
They're already there. They're in job.
Yeah, and then he's going to say, "What are you going to do? Take my attorney general out of the office?" All right. I think. Do we have Catherine Falders? If we do, that was a very quick switch. It looks to me, Catherine, like you are in precisely, exactly the same place that we just saw Mary Bruce. Is that correct?
That's what you call TV magic, John Karl. You know it well.
Unbelievable. Okay, so you told me, I think we can tell everybody this now, but you told me something a few weeks ago, and which I think has been quite prescient. You said that I'm paraphrasing, but you said that the Trump transition story, and at this point the Trump transition was a theoretical thing because he hadn't won, was going to be one of the stories of our lifetime. So you've been ahead of everybody on this story. You have been reporting tirelessly on this, even as before they won, they were preparing for this moment. So let me ask you, as I hear these nominees, as I see the blowback, as I see the stuff that's come out, just how thorough has that vetting been of these cabinet picks?
Well, here's the problem, John. When you have a list and a long list of potential picks for each one of these posts, but then the person who's ultimately announced or nominated ends up not being on that original list, that means that they aren't vetted. So, look, on the one hand, you could say that vetting has been thorough. On the other hand, when you have these picks like Pete Hegseth and Matt Gaetz, of course we know about RFK, but people who weren't on vetting lists, they don't have packets, they weren't asked by the president-elect or his team to go over, then there is no vetting, and that's problematic, and has become obviously problematic as Trump has decided to announce some of these picks. So, in theory, what's supposed to happen over there at Mar-a-Lago, they have these standing transition meetings on their calendar. Every day, Trump will, get some of these presentations. As you know, you've been reporting on this too. It's a list of 3 names, a couple names. He'll go through them with the clicker. There will be videos of their appearances on various different news channels. And then he'll say, I want that guy. Or in the case of Attorney General, he'll say, I don't really want any of them. And I'm just going to pick Matt Gaetz and not tell my team until I'm flying back to Florida and going to announce him in a few minutes. So it's organized in a sense, but also disorganized. So yes, once he announces these people and then his team says, did we vet them? Do we have vetting packets? You can't really have a vetting packet from somebody who wasn't on a list to be vetted. So if that makes any sense, that's how it's really kind of going on over there at Mar-a-Lago.
And usually something that starts happening before the election as a transition team's preparing for a possible victory, top candidates are vetted through what is known as an FBI background check. You've reported that these are not happening. There have not been any FBI background checks. Is that still correct?
There haven't been any FBI background checks there for any of these candidates. And this becomes actually a bigger problem when they're going into the administration and they have to be, at least for the Senate, confirmed spots that are confirmed by the Senate. The Senate, I don't think really ever in history has, dealt with a situation where a candidate wouldn't have an FBI background check to go along with their confirmation hearing. So it's unclear what exactly they're going to do. And all of this, John, is because the Trump team, at least according to sources close to them, believe that DOJ is against them. They don't want to use the FBI because they have in their head that it's equated to special counsel Jack Smith and that Jack Smith would be doing the background checks. That's not true, but that is what Trump is thinking. So with him thinking that, it does create a big hiccup and a problem. Now, what they have discussed is doing some sort of executive order on day one that would give people background checks in mass, essentially. That means that potentially thousands of political appointees would just automatically have access to classified information. I don't really know how that will ultimately work, but that is something that's on the table. At the same time, I'm told that they could reverse course and actually use the FBI because this is now becoming a problem and it's going to get messy. But right now, at least all of these picks that have been announced for these top positions, cabinet level positions, none of them have gone through the FBI database. None of them have background checks. And that's also because they haven't signed those agreements with the government to use their services in the transition.
It's fascinating. He does it the way Trump looks at it. This is asking the FBI, the same FBI that, in his mind, raided my home to get those classified documents to vet my nominees. No way, I'm not doing it. It's fascinating. I've got much more to ask you, but I'm out of time. So, Catherine, thank you very much for joining us, and let us know what else you find out down there. Rick, we're going to have to take a quick break, but before we do and we let you go, I know you know Jared Polis well, the governor of Colorado. I thought it was notable that for all the controversy surrounding Robert F. Kennedy and blowback from Republicans and Democrats and health officials, Democratic governor of Colorado says he's excited about
he came out in support of the Bobby Kennedy pick for HHS. And what I think is interesting about this is you've got people like Mike Pence who are taking the opposite point of view, but Polis is pointing out that what he's talking about are kind of common sense ideas for the idea of health and human services, what you want a department like that to do. And it might be that Kennedy, if we talked about all of these months and months and months, is he a spoiler candidate, a third-party candidate, what it could mean, you can imagine an odd kind of coalition. Maybe there's a Democrat or two in the Senate who wants him to be a member of the cabinet because of the way that he might attack issues in a different way.
Fascinating. All right, Rick, thank you for joining us. Still ahead on This Week Live, Trump's national security cabinet picks are raising alarm bells, and his plans for a massive deportation operation when he takes office. We'll discuss all of that with Martha Raddatz when we come back. Welcome back to This Week Live. I am joined here in the studio by my This Week co-anchor, Martha Raddatz. Martha, thank you for being here.
Hello, John. Great to be with you.
Okay, so I've been dying to talk to you, and we haven't had a chance to really talk since these picks have come out. I want to start with Pete Hegseth. You know a little bit about the Pentagon over the years.
A little bit.
And one of the really controversial things about Hegseth already is what he has said about women in combat. So I want to play you with full context what he has said about his position on women in combat. Take a listen.
As everybody knows, between bone density and lung capacity and muscle strength, men and women are just different. And so if you want to, I'm okay with the idea that you maintain the standards where they are for everybody. Mm-hmm. And if there's some, hard-charging female that meets that standard, great, cool, join the infantry battalion. But that is not what's happened. Yeah. What has happened is the standards have lowered because the general comes by and asks a question. You know what questions are when generals ask questions. They're just a command. Lieutenant or captain or major, why aren't there more women in your unit? That means get some more women in your unit now. And that moves all the way through the training pipeline. And so I'm surprised there hasn't been more blowback on that already in the book, because I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. It hasn't made us more effective, hasn't made us more lethal, has made fighting more complicated.
I mean, how is that going over?
Well, how would you like to be a woman in the infantry after passing, which are very high standards, and they all have to pass that standard? So I keep thinking about the women in the Pentagon, in the Army, who have gone through those courses and are serving honorably. I don't know what's made the Army more effective or more lethal, but those women have certainly done their part. And in fact, the attrition rate and other things is not as bad for females who are in those units. This is something I covered women in combat from the very beginning, and women trying to get into those roles. It has everything to do with wanting to serve the country in that kind of role. Nobody's forcing these women into the infantry. It's also promotion. I mean, if you look at it, John, and you know this well too, there's not been a chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff who was female, because it's sort of catching up with that, because they didn't have either combat experience or these other things that would put them in that rank, and eventually certainly they hope to achieve that kind of rate. kind of rank unmerited.
And this is an interview that was this was like a week old. This is not something he said a long time ago.
This is not an old interview. And so that is something that's very relevant. Whether that will matter in the confirmation hearing, we'll have to see. But I've heard all kinds of rumbling, and not just from women, by the way.
Yeah.
It's, you know, I've asked over the years the standard question, you know, what do you think about having your commander as a female? And they're like, look, we just don't think about it. You know, she's a soldier. She's in the Air Force. Or if she does her job, that's all they care about. I am reading Hegseth's book, and it's very much about how men have prevailed and how men have fought wars. There is an enormous contribution by women in the air, on the ground, overseas, everywhere.
Absolutely, including a woman winning the Silver Star just this week.
Exactly.
So, but let me, more broadly, he's somebody who has been for the last 8 years an anchor on cable television on the weekend. Now he is 20-year, you know, a
Look,
veteran.
he served honorably.
Yes.
He served in combat. He has the Bronze Star. You know, that is great for him. He was a company commander, I believe. That's 50, 150, 100, about 130 to 150 in a company. Now he's going to, if he gets this nomination, 2.5 million. I mean, that's how many people you lead. You wrote about in your book about Chris Miller, who was, I think, a battalion commander or a brigade commander. Lots more people, not that many more, and now it's a company commander. He has very strong opinions about the military. This would be a big change. I mean, he's also criticized very vocally some of the generals who are already there. He's criticized diversity within the ranks. And, you know, you have the chairman of the Joint Chiefs right now, C.Q. Brown, who is an African American and who, after the George Floyd murder, gave a very emotional tape, put out a tape to the troops, talking about his own experiences with, as he said, racial injustice and what it had been like for an African American general. Are they going to look at him and say, this is a guy who's woke, he's out of here?
Okay, and let me, I mean, we can talk about this for a long time, but let me know, you were just out in California, you were talking to farm workers in California about these plans for mass deportations. What did you hear?
You know, this is huge. Like, clearly immigration is a big issue, and clearly there was a crisis at the border, and it's something they really do have to solve. But when you talk to farmers who are out there, and I talked to a farmer named Joe Del Bosque, and he owns a medium-sized farm. They have melons, and he has a whole crew. He said he never asks them whether they're documented or not. But we spoke to one of those undocumented workers, and he said he's been in the country for 40 years, and he's raised his family there, and that provides him income. The farmer said he could not do it without undocumented workers, which, of course, I said, look, are you taking American jobs? He said, no, I cannot find anybody but these workers to pick these melons, and he felt like he might even miss crops, that it would really affect what he could sell, what Americans may get. He was very worried about it. Look, he's one of the brave people who will talk about it,
right?
And seem to have no problem saying, you know, a lot of these guys are undocumented. But he said, look, they've been terrific workers, and I don't know how we'll do it without them. So that's something we looked at this week.
And you sense the fear of that this deportation.
Oh yeah. And the undocumented workers are like, I don't know what I'll do. I mean, finding people who would talk to us, very difficult, because they're very afraid. There will be a raid, and they will be sent back to wherever they came from.
But you did, and we're going to see this on This Week on Sunday. You will be able to see Martha's report on the potential impact of Trump's immigration plans Sunday morning on This Week. And Martha also spoke with Democratic Senator-elect Elissa Slotkin of Michigan and Republican Congressman Tony Gonzalez, who represents the largest border district in Texas. Still ahead here on This Week Live, our insiders on whether Trump's nominees can actually get confirmed. Sarah Isgur and former Senator Heidi Heitkamp join me next. Welcome back. I'm joined now by former Trump Justice Department official, Sarah Isgur. Sarah, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so you're just the person I want to talk to because, as I said in your intro, you were the spokesperson for the Trump Justice Department during the first Trump administration. You worked for a guy named Senator Sessions, soon to be Attorney General Sessions, and soon to be at odds with Donald Trump. So Matt Gaetz, what was your initial reaction when you heard that Matt Gaetz was the pick to be Attorney General?
Wasn't on my bingo card. I'll be really honest with you. I was looking at Mike Lee. I was looking at Ken Paxton, the Texas Attorney General, some of those Missouri guys, but nope, didn't have Matt Gaetz.
How do you think the Justice Department? You worked over there. You knew the career officials. You knew the political appointees. Obviously, you worked with them. Did a guy like Matt Gaetz, who has spent so much of the last several years attacking the Justice Department and saying he wanted to basically root out the career employees over there, how do you think this will be received if he actually becomes Attorney General?
Well, I'll tell you, there's certainly been a lot of conversation about whether career attorneys at the Department of Justice will resign en masse and things like that. But, you know, the timing of this announcement was interesting because the Federalist Society National Conference kicked off this week. And so you had several thousand of the top lawyers, conservative lawyers in the country convening in one place. And this was a hot topic of conversation, obviously. I was surprised by how many of those Trump-supporting lawyers who had planned to go into the Department of Justice said, you know what? I think I'll stay at my law firm. This will simply be too rocky. If it had been a Mike Lee, I was planning to quit and go for a few years and serve. But now I just don't think this is the type of stability that will work for my family and will allow me potentially to even go back to my law firm afterward.
All right. Now, the big question beyond all of that, before we get to that, is can he be confirmed? And you're hearing a lot of Republicans, mostly House Republicans, don't actually have a vote on this, saying there's no way he'll be confirmed. And former House Republicans, like Kevin McCarthy, saying that, Gaetz is not going to be confirmed. I'm not so sure about that, but look, I mean, it's a very steep climb. Can Trump, if he can't get him confirmed, do what he has talked about, which is have Congress go into recess and then make a recess appointment bypassing Senate confirmation? Can he really do that on something like an Attorney General pick?
Well, let me explain what the Constitution says about it. It basically says the president has the power to adjourn Congress if the two houses can't agree. Now, of course, we've all been like, well, then they have to agree not to agree so that Trump has that power. Except, of course, if they do agree to adjourn, then they're adjourned. So it's heads you win, tails I lose. So there will be a recess, no doubt. Now the question is, what is the president's power in a recess? The Constitution in Article 2 says that the president shall have the power to fill such vacancies as may arise during such a recess. Of course, this was back when Congress, was gone. And I mean, gone back home. We would take days on a horse to get back. There weren't phones. There wasn't internet. And so if those vacancies happened, then it gave the president that recess appointment power so that he didn't have to go through the advise and consent process. Now, in 2014, the Supreme Court 5-4 held, look, yes, the president has that power if the recess is for 3 or more days. We don't quite know what the number is, but President Obama, like that fake recess that was basically a long weekend that you tried to use, no, Congress was obviously in session, so you can't do that. But the 4 justices led by Justice Scalia, who concurred only in the judgment that Obama couldn't do that, said, no, the vacancy itself has to arise during this recess. And that's what this is all going to be about if Donald Trump tries to use this.
Sir, let me just pause for a second because you're saying some very important stuff, but it is a little bit complicated. So you're saying this power of the recess appointment, that you had 4 justices on the Supreme Court who basically said that the president doesn't have this power unless it's the old-fashioned kind of recess where Congress is out of town, they're done for the session, not like now, not like a fake recess.
That's right. Scalia said it was an anachronism of a constitutional power.
Now, wait a minute, because I know you know the person, I know you know the law, and I know you know the people. So there were 4 justices who voted this way, saying, look, you really can't make these recess appointments like this. One of them is Scalia. Scalia is no longer with us, RIP. Who were the other three?
It was the conservatives on the court, and that's why I really emphasize what that concurrence in the judgment only happened to say. It was Alito, it was Thomas, it was Roberts. So
I
those
think they're
three
all
are
still on the
court?
court. Yes. Okay. So if this goes back to the Supreme Court again, it'd be very interesting. The conservatives would not be on Trump's side unless they've had a change of heart in the last 10 years. Fascinating.
And that itself wouldn't be unusual. The first Trump administration had the lowest success rate at the Supreme Court of any modern presidential administration, lower than Obama, lower than Biden.
So the bottom line, and we're out of time here, but the bottom line, it's not clear that this would work. Trump would try to do these recess appointments. Not clear it would work.
But it takes a while for something to get to the Supreme Court, John.
So, all right. Sarah Isgur, thank you for joining us. Talk to you again soon. Still ahead here on This Week Live, former Democratic Senator Heidi Heitkamp responds. We will be right back. All right, let's turn to former North Dakota Senator Heidi Heitkamp. Senator Heitkamp, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, John.
All right, dying to talk to you about the Senate confirmation process coming up because, if I'm right, you were there for the confirmations of Trump's first cabinet. Am I correct?
I was.
Okay. There was some controversy surrounding some of his nominees. How much different did these picks look than those?
Oh, I don't even think there's a comparison. You know, the comparison between Gates and Jeff Sessions. Number one, Jeff Sessions had a lot of friends in the Senate. He was a very conservative, served as Attorney General and U.S. Attorney in his state. And then, you know, so clearly highly qualified, but not somebody people would ideologically agree on. And I think what Trump discovered with those early picks where, you know, they seemed to be more mainstream Republican, they weren't going to be loyal to him. Jeff Sessions was fairly loyal to the Department of Justice and the rule of law. And so Trump looks at that and says, I'm not going with one of these safe picks. I'm going to go with somebody who I know will do what I ask him to do. And that should terrify everyone, especially limited qualifications. Never mind all the investigations, but think about qualifications of this candidate versus even Bill Barr, people who served in the Justice Department for Trump in the first term.
I mean, Bill Barr had all kinds of experience. He was a former Attorney General, for God's sake. It's quite a difference. So, what is your sense? I mean, you were there, as you know, it took a while to get the rest of his cabinet in place the last time, even though it was, by these standards, far more mainstream. Do you think that the likes of Gates and Hegseth and Tulsi Gabbard and Bobby Kennedy get confirmed? And if so, like, how long does that process take?
Well, let's just play this out, John. When you look at the process that they're going to go through, the Democrats want nothing more than a confirmation process for these folks, because in the first 100 days, it's all going to be about their lack of qualifications, suspicion regarding relationships to Russia. You know, you know, you had the earlier segment with Martha talking about somebody who is going to really put a crimp on recruitment. These are all really tough questions for people to answer. And then put yourself in a fellow South Dakotan's position, John Thune. He's going to put his caucus out there, and they're going to have to either say no to Trump and yes to the rule of law, or they're going to have to, you know, kind of be responsible for these appointments. And so, you know, whether John Thune basically does the recess and allows these appointments to go forward, I think is a litmus test for Trump. And it's also a litmus test for Thune. But you can understand why he doesn't want that distraction of these really, I think, horrific picks for the cabinet to evaporate any opportunity you have in the first 100 days.
It's going to be wild, and if they try to move for a recess to do this, I can only imagine what goes down on the floor of the United States Senate. Look, Senator Heitkamp, always great to talk to you. One of those Democrats in the Senate who had a very good relationship with Republicans. It's going to be interesting to watch. Thank you very much.
I actually think
Yeah.
You bet.
You actually think what?
Well, I actually think I voted for every one of his appointments because I figure he's entitled to his team, and that should be the attitude. But at some point, you do have advise and consent for a reason. And the question is if Thune does decide he's going to go to a recess appointment, does he have the votes? Given how controversial these appointments are.
It takes 50 votes to go into recess. It'd be hard to imagine any Democrat and maybe the few Republicans who would vote for every single one of these nominees like you did. Thank you very much, Senator Heitkamp. We'll talk to you again soon.
You bet. Take care.
Still ahead here on This Week, we'll break down how Capitol Hill is reacting to Trump's nominees. We are back in just a moment. Welcome back. Many of Trump's nominees are sure to face an uphill battle in Congress. So let's bring in Politico Playbook co-author Rachel Bade, who is the expert on all things Capitol Hill. Rachel, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, John.
Bottom line, do these nominees get through? Do they all get through? Does Gaetz get through? Does Hegseth get through? Does Tulsi Gabbard get through?
You know, I kind of agree with you, John. I've been hearing you say throughout the week that, you know, when everybody expresses this skepticism that people like Matt Gaetz are going to get confirmed, they're sort of ignoring the fact that, you know, Donald Trump had this decisive victory on Election Day. And a lot of these Senate Republicans, they're going to feel pressure to vote for one of these nominees or multiple of these nominees. I think that, you know, the fact that Donald Trump has sort of flooded the zone right now with all these controversial picks has sort of sent this signal to Senate Republicans that if they're going to take out one, they're going to feel even more pressure to fall in line, you know, with the rest of them. And so I think Senate Republicans, I would not envy their position right now. They don't want to be out there going against the leader of their party, who frankly is the reason why they hold the majority. Right now, they don't want to see the MAGA wing of the party come after them and troll them on Twitter, as was happening during the leadership race just about a week ago. But look, they have concerns about each one of these, John, and we could go through them. And this is not a predicament that they want to find themselves in.
I mean, if there were a secret ballot, I think that maybe there could be 4, maybe 5 nominees that would go down, not
Absolutely.
just Matt Gaetz. But I tell you, I think that it's going to be very hard for the reasons you just enumerated, for these Republicans to say, Mr. Donald Trump, after winning the popular vote, after helping us regain the majority, I'm going to say no to your pick for Attorney General. I think that's going to be tough. But let me ask you about one that we've talked less about, who is very controversial, and that's Tulsi Gabbard, of course, a lifelong Democrat, former member of the House, also a combat veteran, but somebody who went to see Assad in Syria at a time when the United States was saying Assad had used chemical weapons on his own people. Somebody who has had very controversial views on Russia. I want to play for you something that Tulsi Gabbard said before she went MAGA. This is just 4 years ago, so it's not ancient history. 4.5 years ago, 2020. This is what she said after the U.S. attack ordered by Donald Trump on Iranian leader Qasem Soleimani, seen as the primary tool for exporting terror from Iran. Many see it as a highlight of Trump's term in terms of national security. This is how Tulsi Gabbard responded to it.
We've heard Trump supporters and President Trump basically say, look, no American casualties, and we took out a bad guy, Soleimani, a terrorist leader. What would your response to that be?
Well, first, I just came from the intelligence briefing that the administration came and brought to Congress. Really, they provided vague comments, no justification whatsoever for this illegal and unconstitutional act of war that President Trump took.
You don't buy the imminent attack against Americans?
No, they failed to provide any compelling information to prove their point of imminence. And really, it brings us to the central question here, which is our country's national security better off because of Donald Trump's actions and decision? The answer to that is no.
So I just want to underline the words. No justification whatsoever for this illegal and unconstitutional act of war that President Trump took. Now, you're old enough to remember that Tulsi Gabbard was a supporter, maybe a co-chair of Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign. Does she, I mean, could we see her actually get Democratic votes? And then Republicans voting no?
That's actually a good question, John. Democrats obviously not happy that she has moved over to the Trump wing of the party to support Donald Trump. So I would be skeptical of that, but she could certainly pick up a few, perhaps even Bernie Sanders. But look, I think the fact that we're not even hearing or seeing, headlines about Tulsi Gabbard, this just really underscores just how controversial all these picks are. I mean, at any other time with any other president, a president having a selection like this would be top of mind, especially for Republicans who, say they've often been sort of Russia hawks, and she's somebody who is now very much pro-Russia. Look, just to step back here, though, I mean, Heidi Heitkamp made a point in the last segment that I think is really critical for Donald Trump. I think obviously he's sending a signal to Washington right now that he wants to bend Republicans to his will and that he thinks he has the right to do it. He has the mandate to do it. But look, if he's doing this and having these confirmation battles, he's not going to be able to sort of get Congress to sort of pass legislation and work on like the sausage making of actually moving an agenda through Congress. I mean, if they're having these high profile hearings, you can already see a situation where Democrats are pushing for instance, with Pete Hegseth, this girl who alleged he had he sexually assaulted her, calling up to Capitol Hill. You can already see a situation where the witnesses who have come forward to the House Ethics Committee, want to come to testify. This is going to suck up all the oxygen in Washington, and that means less time
for a Trump 100-day agenda
to get things passed.
Yeah. All right, Rachel Bade, we didn't get a chance to talk about Mitch McConnell, which is what I really wanted to talk to you about. So we'll talk to you again soon. We're out of time. We'll be right back.
What does it take to be the most watched newscast in America?
An operation to capture ISIS fighters.
Is this our Combat Operations Center?
We're approaching the gate now. Militants came in from 4 or 5 different directions. Operational nuclear reactor. So you have a couple loaded and ready to go. The house is destroyed, but the flag, there's not a tear in it.
Not a tear in it.
How important is this label right here, Made in the USA? Look at your smile. You're proud of this.
I love this.
Great work.
Hi.
Where are you? Where are you?
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
David, good to meet you.
Ismail? David.
David.
Yes. I'm David Muir.
I know who you are.
You
Watch
do?
you every night.
ABC's World News Tonight with David Muir is America's most watched newscast.
Willis Wu.
You know my name?
Oh. For decades, Chinatown's been the epicenter of crime in the city. I need someone on the inside. Follow me.
Jeez. A detective and a waiter. Partners.
Freeze.
Solving cases, catching bad guys.
Can I place an order to go, please?
Well, close!
Behind every country song, there's a human story.
At that time, guys like me were not artists.
People didn't respect me because I didn't do it the traditional way.
And you just have to say, hell with it.
Hell with it.
What's good to watch, read? Where can I get a great deal on what I'm just dying to buy? Oh, it's all right here. GMA Life. Get the latest celebrity buzz, deals and steals, and the coolest lifestyle tips from GMA.
I love that so much.
Streaming weekends on ABC News Live.
That's all for us today. Thank you for sharing part of your Friday with us. Stay tuned for more news, context, and analysis on all the stories, all the day's big stories right here on ABC News Live. And just a reminder, tune in this week, Sunday morning on ABC. This Sunday, Martha speaks with Democratic Senator-elect Alyssa Slotkin of Michigan and GOP Congressman Tony Gonzalez, who represents the largest border tech district in Texas. I'm Jonathan Karl, and until next week, that's This Week Live.